Today's episode of Giles and the Goalie is brought to you by Circle Rock and CircleRock.com. Check out the website. If you do make a purchase, use a promo code ZONE25. Get a $25 gift card on your next purchase. Again, that is CircleRock.com. Use the promo code ZONE25.
The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
They may be drinkers, Robin, but they're also human beings.
Hell yeah, let's get stinko.
This is the Giles and the Goalie podcast as part of the Zone Coverage Podcast Network. With your hosts, Giles Farrell and Ben Remington.
Welcome, Giles and the Goalie podcast. I am your host, Giles Farrell. Across the internet is Ben Remington.
Hello.
You are literally on the other side of the internet.
Yes. If the internet was a glass wall.
Yeah. So we did have an agenda for this podcast for the first time in like 2 months. So it's only fitting that I get to crumple up that agenda right now, and we go on.
That's what we get for preparing, Giles. You should know better.
Yeah, this is why we don't prepare, because it goes to hell when we prepare.
Right.
However, I am enjoying the hell out of the Timberwolves, who just score points and points and points.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. For Timberwolves discussion, listen to the Dane Moore podcast.
Yes.
We're going to jump right into it because we've got hot news, and we actually got to record after news broke, which is exciting because that never happens to us.
It is genuinely shocking me that this didn't happen next week when we were planning on recording at 4 or 5 p.m. when both of us get off of work. But tonight, because of my daycare obligations, we were recording much later, and it saved us for once.
Yeah. So the Minnesota Wild obviously made a trade here on Monday evening. They sent Jason Zucker to the Pittsburgh Penguins in exchange for their first-round pick in the 2020 draft, a defensive prospect named Kalen Addison, and forward Alex Galchenyuk, a former number 3 overall pick of the Montreal Canadiens, who will now be on his third team in as many years. And your instant reaction on this trade, the first trade by Bill Guerin as general manager?
Well, I think everyone's going to have mixed emotions about this, some more than others, and that's perfectly okay. I think everyone is kind of going out of their way to mention what a Hall of Fame human being Jason Zucker is.
As you should.
And that's absolutely 100%, going to be the sentiment, and he deserves it. And it's always hard when you trade a player like that, that has done so much for the community. He's really become an adoptive Minnesotan, and not just because of his wife, but because of the stuff that he's done here. So I think that's fair to mention that first and foremost, and for our purposes, kind of get it out of the way and discuss the brass tacks. I mean, it's fair value, I think is also fair to say. I think it's not one of those trades where you're just like, whoa, this team got fleeced, or this team got a steal, or, and with prospects and picks, it always can turn out to be like that, a la Brent Burns. But, I think this is fair value if the Wild had to trade Jason Zucker, which maybe is another conversation altogether. But assuming they needed to deal him, I think they got an okay return for him. I'm not blown away by it, but it's an okay return.
Why do you think it's just okay? Like, what makes you think they could have done better?
Well, I'm also, I'm operating under the premise that Alex Galchenyuk is almost worthless. I don't see him as any part of this return at all. It was like an NBA trade where his salary had to
Right,
get
they had to
thrown
even out the
at
money.
the Wild. Like, it's literally an NBA trade. I don't know. First and a second for Zucker seems fine. But it's going to be probably a late-ish first.
Right.
And the second is a right-handed defenseman, which is nice, but he's also 19, and it's not like, I don't know. When you make trades like this, you always kind of hope that you're going to end up with a piece better than the guy you dealt, because otherwise, why make the trade? And I'm not sure that they got that in this trade.
On the first reaction, you read up about the defenseman, Addison, a very offensive-minded defenseman who obviously he has some work to do defensively, but he was regarded as the Penguins' best prospect, which, I can't speak for the quality of their farm system, but
they've dealt away their first-round pick how many years?
You still took their best prospect and their first-round pick, so I see this as a success, and I actually, before we went on the air, I wrote that this should be on, right now as a success for Bill Guerin in making his first trade, because you're not going to get better assets for Jason Zucker. Now, you can make the argument, as I think Evolving Wild did, you maybe didn't need to trade Jason Zucker, but I also see the argument for trading him in that, he was a hot commodity, and Pittsburgh badly wanted him so bad they gave up their first and their best prospect. Yeah. And knowing the Wild and how they operate, I can't see this as anything but a success. And time will tell. History will say how this trade will go down. It can, I can come back to this 7 years from now and say this was an abject disaster. But right now, I think they did absolutely the best they can. And to Galchenyuk, I don't even really consider him part of this, but it was just for salary purposes. And as I noted in my reaction piece, the Wild might try him out at center because he can play center, and the Wild are absolutely horrifying down the middle right now. So maybe there's a little plus side there, but I wrote about it 2 weeks ago. The Wild need to start thinking about their future and getting future assets, and you had to move somebody for Kaprizov coming next year, and you probably moved the best guy you could have. So,
well, I mean, highest return, yeah. I don't know, and I guess part of my issue with it a little bit too, I'm not panning this trade. I think it was a fine trade. I'm just not wild about it. Is that you had 3 years on Zucker? Like that's a lot of team control. It is incredibly rare for an NHLer to be dealt with that much control left. So maybe that's another reason why I'm just a little tiny bit down in this trade, or think that it's okay, just okay, because there was a lot of time left on Zucker's contract.
Are you also maybe of the salty belief that Zucker's just going to absolutely destroy teams in Pittsburgh now?
Oh God, yeah. I don't think that was, even if you wanted him gone, which we know some pseudo famous folks in the Twin Cities that very much wanted him gone. Even they'll tell you that he's going to destroy, Pittsburgh. He's going to play on Crosby's wing, at least initially, and he is going to do extremely well for himself, and good for him. I mean, it's going to be a lot of fun for him, and he's probably going to make himself a lot more money at the end of that 3 years, hopefully, for his sake, being on Crosby's wing rather than maybe staying in Minnesota. But, I think he's going to absolutely be phenomenal in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and as you said, he's a great human being, one of the better ones that you can probably come across in professional sports. And the other thing I did note was the fact that Jason Zucker was demoted to the fourth line. So his game had tailed off, and I think that was another reason why I was right to pull the trigger and get this deal now, because if it kept going this way and he wasn't, playing to the potential that we all know he should be, then, you're not going to get that good of a deal, even though he still has 3 years left.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I'm a little bit on the evolving wild side of things here, where I'm not as convinced that you needed to deal him. When you've got other assets that you can move to make space for Kirill Kaprizov, like Jason Zucker, you've got 8 wings on this team, or 9. I just don't know that he needed to be the guy to go, but it is what it is. And like you said, like we've talked about, at least they got what seems like a fair return for him. It's just kind of the question is going to be, are the fans going to be happy with this? Because they're losing a guy that's very much a fan favorite, very much a good player, but this also very much plays into the rebuild / tank.
I don't necessarily think it's subscribing to a tank. I just think...
not a tank, not a full-blown tank.
I just
because
think...
we've established many times they literally can't do that, but at least, a pseudo-tank where they're angling for a better draft pick.
Right, and I think there's a good way to retool on the fly. It might take a year or two, but I think that's what's been greenlit here by ownership. It's been reported that Guerin has full freedom to do with this team as he feels, and I think it's very tenable that he feels he can retool this team and make them into a legit contender in a couple years. But when we come to our next topic, there's still work to be done.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just it. It's still not, there's a lot of moving pieces still, and there's a lot of questions around this that we got in our mailbag today that kind of touch the same topic. So it's, I don't know. It seems like a step in that direction, and it is good. It's great that Guerin has free reign. You really hate to hear about any kind of directive coming from any sports ownership. Even though these things make sense and air quotes, it is a business. It's nice that he was given the reins to do that, because you just really hate hearing about owners meddling with the team's operations, no matter how much money they have invested.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Do you have any other thoughts on this trade? It's still pretty raw. It's only been about an hour since the news broke, so I don't have a whole lot more to say than what I've already said and written, and maybe there will be more to say as time goes on and I can put together more words.
Yeah. Well, so just the final bit on me and the value of it. The first round pick is going to be late-ish, right? And my argument before, when I said the return was just okay, is late first round pick. What are the odds that player becomes as good or better than Jason Zucker? I feel like it's pretty low, even though it's a first round pick.
That's what draft picks are, unless you're drafting in like the top 5. It's basically a lottery ticket. Yeah,
that's what I mean. And then this Addison kid, seems like a good prospect, top defensive prospect for Pittsburgh, and all around good player. But he would have to reach like last season's level of Matt Dumba to be worth more than Jason Zucker. So that's my issue, is that there isn't a lot of chances for Minnesota to get a player better than Jason Zucker when this trade is all said and done.
Right.
And with Alex Galchenyuk, again, he is money just thrown to get Pittsburgh under the cap. But the interesting thing is, I wonder if the Wild could flip him. I don't think the odds are very good, and I don't know that they would get much.
No.
But would you take like a third-round pick for him? I think
if you can get that, yes, smash the
that's
trade button.
Yeah, and so like I don't know. I mean, I think that he still has just enough name equity out there, and on an expiring contract. I mean, even if the Wild have to retain his salary for the rest of the season, who cares? I don't know. I'd kind of like to see them try to flip him if they could. But yeah, like you said, easier said than done.
Yeah, and it's not like it makes that big of a difference. He is on an expiring contract, so he's coming off the books at the end of this year anyway.
Yeah.
So if you have to sit through 20 more games with him, so be it. And you know what? I'll say it. I'm actually intrigued to see if Bruce Boudreau can do anything with him.
That's fair. That's entirely fair.
Because we've seen he's done some good work with Jason Zucker. The one season he had Eric Halla, Kevin Fiala more recently.
Sure.
So there's no shortage of players who I'm sure Bruce has helped find the right rhythm in the league with the Wild. So that'll be fascinating to see.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's all I got on this trade right now. We'll have more on that probably next week, and also more written content at Zone Coverage as we break it all down for you. So the first thing that I actually had on the agenda before our agenda was crumpled up and tossed away was we need to talk about the Wild goaltending again. And yeah, it's just starting to become like beating a dead horse with this, but it is absolutely terrible, and it frankly cost the Wild a game Sunday night that they otherwise needed to win very badly to stay or get closer in the playoff race, and you can put that loss on goaltending. Yeah. Kevin Dubnyk's first goal was an absolutely stoppable shot, and it goes right through him. And it's Pierre-Edouard Bellemare who's firing this shot right through him. This isn't Al Iafrate firing 108-mile-an-hour slappers. This is some 73-mile-an-hour knuckle puck coming at you. Like, you have to stop it.
Let's just take a moment to appreciate Al Iafrate's mullet.
Oh, yeah. It's completely glorious.
That was a great mullet.
Yeah.
Sidebar.
We've talked about it. Is that like him and Jágr, like best mullets?
Well, I think they're totally different. I mean, Al Iafrate's got really thin on top to the point where it was like a skullet for a while.
They're very different, but they're very glorious.
Yeah. I think they're glorious. Like, Jágr's was more glorious and like a pure hockey, like that classic, superstar goal scorer type mullet, where Al Iafrate's was just like a dirty beer league hockey mullet. It was great.
Yeah,
good call. Anyway, goaltending.
And if you look at the stats and the metrics and stuff, you will see that the Wild are coming in, towards the bottom or at the bottom of the league in goaltending, and it continues to cost them. And if they had otherwise even slightly below average goaltending, they would be in a much better spot. And my point is that I was going to try and write about early this week, but it might have to be put in the can until later on, is this is becoming, an underlying thing for Bill Guerin to figure out is, what do you do at goaltender next year? Nothing's going to change this year. Unless they completely fall off a cliff here in the next couple of weeks. I don't see Capo Käkkinen getting any starts until the Wild are completely out of it with 2 games left in April, and that's not a good enough sample size to see what you really have with him. And then you're left with Devin Dubnyk on a year left of his contract, and you've got 2 years left of Alex Stalock, and Devin Dubnyk has I believe it's a modified no-move clause, so he's really not going to be moved. So what do you do? Because you can't go into another season with this very below-average goaltending. And again, I hate to rag on Al, but he's not a starter in the NHL, regardless of what you think.
He's not a backup in the NHL.
Yeah, he's a borderline backup.
Yeah, very. Yeah, and just a quick side note, everyone singing Paul Fenton's praises because Kevin Fiala is #actually good. Let's not forget that he's the one that extended Alex Stalock for 3 years, which, as I said,
to bloody cover the expansion draft. Nobody wants that now.
Which, like I said, at the time, was the most indefensible move he made all season. Worse than trading Nino for a guy that you didn't even scout. Because at least there was a chance that Rask was something, but Alex Stalock, you knew what you were getting, and you still wrapped him up for 3 GD years, making him the only backup goaltender in the freaking league signed for the next 3 years. Anyway, yeah, honestly, it kind of came to my mind now, just looking back on the structure of Devin Dubnyk's contract, and the fact that you can't trade him to another team to be a backup because he's a very affordable starting goaltender, but he would be a fairly expensive backup goaltender. I kind of think he might get bought out. And if he doesn't improve, that's the only path that Guerin has. You buy out Dubnyk or you send Stalock down to Iowa and just take I believe it's like a $200,000 hit on the cap for Stalock, which I think is well worth it. And then you sign a backup goaltender that's actually worthy of being an NHL goaltender. And so that I don't know, those are just some things that I think you can do, because Dubnyk's salary is very low in the final years of his contract, so his buyout will be very affordable and won't kill you on the cap for the next 2 years. And Alex Stalock just has to be buried. And you can do one of those things, you can do both of those things, but he has to do something, because if you go into next season with those 2 guys as your starting goaltender, making any kind of case that you're going to make a run for the playoffs, you're absolutely fooling yourself. And this is, aside from the whole Bob Mason issue, which you and I have touched on in the past, and I don't like to harp on it as much as we don't like to harp on Al Stalock being bad, but they need to make a change at goaltending coach. Bob Mason's been here for 3 goddamn decades. Like, it's time for a change. And if you're ever going to get something different out of Devin Dubnyk, who is a talented goaltender and has, played at a Vezina level, it's going to be by changing your goalie coach. If you're not going to do that, then you really need to buy out Devin Dubnyk, because nothing is going to change.
I'm mad at you because you literally took what I wrote down. I literally wrote down this point this afternoon when I was thinking about it at my desk.
Yeah.
And it was that Devin Dubnyk is low-key a buyout candidate for this offseason. Well,
we said that, that was something that I noted, and I believe you probably noted too when that contract was signed. I mean, the value, the salary of that contract drops off a cliff after 4, or was it 3 years? I mean, it was a very buyout-friendly contract when it was signed, because there was a lot of uncertainty about him being able to keep it up when he was signed to that contract. He had literally played 1/2 season of good hockey in his career, and so it was Chuck Fletcher's way of kind of protecting himself a little bit, and here we are. It's kind of turning out that way.
Yeah. It's difficult to really harp on Dubnyk because he's got a lot going on behind the scenes, but yeah,
it's just like with Stalock. We're not faulting the people themselves.
I'm trying to say this as objectively as I possibly can.
Right.
I don't want to make it seem like I have a vendetta against any of these players. Did you die?
No.
Oh.
I thought you were going somewhere else with that.
No, that was it.
Okay. No, I agree. It just, I think that it depends because I can understand with Kaprizov coming over next year, maybe you don't want to, in a way, push your chips in and try to be a playoff team that early. Maybe you let him get a season under his belt, a season in North America, which he's never been here before, except for maybe some juniors and and some other stuff like that. I could see them keeping these guys around for next season and just kind of, not waving the white flag a little bit, but just kind of being like, F it. Let's see what happens. And then after that, we've got a little bit more flexibility to maybe add a goaltender some way, somehow, following the 2021 season, especially with the expansion draft looming.
Yeah.
Because if the expansion draft rules are the same, every team can only protect one goaltender. And so there's going to be some really good backup goaltenders probably available. And I don't think everyone's going to be sitting on their hands again like they did with Vegas, because hopefully some NHL front offices learned their goddamn lesson.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how Bill Guerin navigates the expansion draft as opposed to his counterparts around the league, most of which who were GMs in some place or another because everyone just loves to reshuffle the damn deck. But yeah, that's something to look forward to. But yeah, unless this will be my last point on goaltending, unless the Wild have either Dubnyk or Stalock go on some insane miracle run of just hot play, I can't take their playoff chances seriously. Even though I've really liked what the team in front of the goaltenders did in this last week specifically, and even going back a couple weeks, the Wild in front of their goaltending has played really good. It's just they've gotten very poor goaltending. So
yeah.
This would not be, we would be singing a completely different tune about this team if they had remotely good goaltending.
Yeah.
Anywhere close to average.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah. Another thought that I had, because we mentioned Kaprizov a few times in here, is this came up today in a Twitter conversation I was having, but who's going to feed him the puck next year? That's another frightening thought.
Alex Stalock.
Oh, God. Alex Stalock just fires three-quarter ice passes because Kaprizov's just cherry-picking the defense.
That's a very good question. And I don't know that we necessarily have an answer for that. I don't know that Bill Guerin honestly has an answer for that. And unfortunately, it could end up being a situation where, like for Marian Gaborik, his first couple of seasons, he wasn't quite as successful as he could have been because he didn't have that pairing. And it wasn't until Pavel Demitra showed up where Gaborik really flourished and reached kind of his peak potential. I honestly think that's probably what we see out of Kaprizov. I think that he's not going to have anybody like that because there certainly isn't anybody like that necessarily in the roster right now. I mean, we really like Joel Eriksson. I don't know that he is an elite puck distributor. Koivu's years are behind him. Eric Stahl, that's not really his game. It's going to be tough because obviously acquiring a guy like that isn't going to be easy either. So it's probably going to be a few years before the Wild do have somebody really good to distribute the puck to Kaprizov.
And maybe that's something they look for now moving towards the trade deadline is, it's probably, a snowball's chance in hell of happening, but trying to move somebody for some kind of young top six center, which, again, I'm not holding any kind of hope of happening, but it's got to be something that, they're looking for.
And maybe I'll backtrack just a touch, but maybe Eriksson is that guy. Maybe we see some improvement. Maybe not to say he's bad at puck distributing. I think he's a good passer, and he's certainly made some incredible plays this year passing the puck. It's just, he doesn't have the entirety of his game that screams first line center, so we'll see. He might be the guy paired together with Kaprizov just out of necessity for the first few years of Kaprizov's tenure, and maybe then they can get some kind of upgrade, but who knows?
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting. Right now, you'd probably think Eric Stahl would probably start next year as that center. I don't know. That's such a long way to think right now, but it is something you kind of have to think about in the back of your head because it's not like the Wild have ever really had an elite offensive center feeding the puck to some of the better wingers that they've had here.
Right.
So,
and to his credit, Kaprizov is actually a pretty good passer himself. He's shown the ability to make space, obviously, and that's what's important. So him and Stahl could work very well together, just in the fact that they're two very offensively talented guys, and even though neither one of them's primary game is passing the puck, they could still end up working very well together.
Yeah. Speaking of finding a center to set up a great winger, Kevin Fiala is absolutely a world beater right now. I don't have the direct stats in front of me, but good God, this guy is just an offensive dynamo, and you have to first tip your cap to where it's due. And our friend Tony Abbott, who does work at The Athletic, bought stock in Fiala before the season when nobody else was, and now he is a very, very rich man.
Yeah.
This is all hypothetical stock. Tony hasn't made a cent off of this.
Very important to note that. And I'll own up right away. We were wrong. I was wrong, at least, on Fiala. And not that I thought that he was a bad player. I just didn't know that he could be this good. I didn't see this level of potential out of him, and certainly it's flourished. And we talked about early in the season about maybe selling high on him because he had a good little stretch there. And now, a short time later, that looks like a completely ludicrous idea. And that just kind of goes to show you the run that he's been on and how good he's been for this team. And without Kevin Fiala, this Wild team is absolutely abysmal offensively.
Right.
Especially now dealing Jason Zucker, like, good Lord, would this team be bad offensively without Kevin Fiala after dealing Zucker. So, just incredible stretch of play right now. And you just kind of hope he can keep it up and, be one of those guys, one of those complementary pieces or very duoed pieces with Kaprizov to make this team successful in the future.
Right. And if you didn't see his goal Sunday night against the Avalanche, go find it because it was incredible. That's not something we've seen in a while in Minnesota, and maybe something we've not seen ever.
It was very not safe for work.
Yeah. So in the month of February alone, in 5 games, Kevin Fiala has 4 goals and 3 assists, 7 points. And he's shooting the lights out, 19%. Good God.
Wow.
And just scoring goals that no one else on this team can.
Yeah. No, I mean, he was really, we've made the joke about him being a game breaker because that was the quote from Fenton.
Weird, he was
at
right.
the time. But yeah, and again, going back to not thinking the world of Fenton, this might have been more of a blind squirrel finds a nut type situation than Paul Fenton being some kind of clairvoyant genius. But at least he liked his guy and went out and got his guy, and it certainly looks like a great move right now, which can't really be said for any of his other moves. But this looks like a great trade for the Wild, as Mikael Granlund just absolutely flounders in Nashville.
And I want to bring this up because obviously I had the video on Twitter of the goal Fiala scored, and it was a popular tweet. So there was a lot of interesting replies coming through in the mentions before I muted the mentions. And a common thing I was seeing from Wild fans is maybe it's time to apologize to Paul Fenton. And I say, no, absolutely not.
No.
I'm closer to your theory that it was a blind squirrel finding a nut, although I don't completely, buy into that because he had the experience with scouting Fiala in Nashville.
Sure.
But given his other trades, I lean more towards the blind squirrel finds a nut.
Yeah.
Also, I'm not apologizing to someone who was a complete ass to everyone in the front office, everyone in the media, anyone in the building.
Yeah.
No, that's not a reason I'm ever going to say maybe he was onto something. It was a dysfunctional front office. If you ever forgot anything that went on during that time, go read Russo's piece from The Athletic. I tweeted that out today. It still was absolutely the right thing to do to move on and bring in Bill Guerin, even though he might have done right with the Fiala trade, and his two drafts might have actually been good. It's nowhere close to saying maybe he was in the right. Absolutely not.
No, yeah, and you can give him credit for that one trade. Okay, fine. Well, he made several trades.
Remember when he brought in Anthony Potato off the scrap heap and and it was just the most completely useless move I've ever seen this team make?
Oh my God.
And this team has made a lot of useless moves.
I can't believe Potato is still playing in the NHL. That just goes to show you how brutal the Jets defense is right now.
Not good.
Because he is just brutal. I'm with you 100%. And actually, funny, I don't know if you saw this, Paul Fenton got a job today.
He did. That's why I went on my little soapbox.
Scout for the Blue Jackets now, which, we talked about it this morning when we were talking about this very topic at work, and it's he'll be a good scout, whatever. That's his background. I'm sure he's good at that. Just don't have him managing people because he's such an epic dick. He got fired after one season as an NHL GM, which is almost unheard of. Don't feel like anybody owes this guy anything, as Michael Russo very hilariously pointed out the other day.
Yeah, he doesn't have to do jack. You know what?
Right.
I almost said the word. So it is good to see Kevin Fiala, setting the world on fire and, basically proving everyone in the world wrong except for Paul Fenton.
And Tony.
Yes, and Tony. Tony, the only one who bought stock.
Yeah, he's like Forrest Gump investing in Apple.
All right. Before we go to the mailbag, you got anything else you want to add on anything?
No, I think we'll touch on in the mailbag. I don't. Obviously, the Zucker news was trumped everything. So yeah, let's head to the mailbag.
Right. All right. So we did a mailbag on our Twitter at GATG Wild Podcast. We did get quite a few questions, so we will dive in here. The first question comes from Tom Jack. He wants to know, The Wild have stopped announcing the paid attendance at home games as of late. Discuss.
Well, you know what? If you have to announce that you suck, you probably wouldn't do it in a crowded room with a megaphone.
Right.
Just throwing that out there. It's in a way it's a little bit enjoyable for a lot of us that the sellout streak ended. Because the whole state of hockey thing is such a line of BS to me. But the Wild obviously took it as some kind of point of pride that they were selling out so many games, aside from the fact that they obviously enjoyed all the money they were making. But yeah, I don't blame the Wild for not announcing that. Same as I don't blame the fans for not showing up anymore.
Yeah, and I replied to the tweet with my Riker smiling gif, but it's pretty simple. The Wild are not good; they're mediocre, and people don't want to pay a lot of money to see a mediocre product.
Yeah,
I saw a report today. I think it was from the Star Tribune that said the Wild are the second most expensive sports team in town behind the Vikings. When you factor in
right.
ticket costs and food and beverage.
Yeah, no, absolutely sounds
the
right.
Second most expensive. And when you are a middling product for several years, people aren't going to want to pay excess amount of dollars to go see that. And you can see that with the secondary market right now. You can get tickets to see Tuesday's game or Thursday's game for less than $20.
Yeah, it's just, and not to mention too, aside from them being a middling product, it's not like we've talked about this before. It's not like the game experience is great either. We've bemoaned the game ops and how much that hasn't changed and how mediocre that's been. And we've also bemoaned, you hate to be these guys, but the fans a little bit. Like it's tough to sit through a Wild game because so many people there think that they know so much more than everybody on the ice and everybody on the benches and everybody in the announce booth. And it's kind of not a super fun experience. And I can say that having been to a couple of other hockey arenas where they have fun experiences.
Vegas.
Right.
And I noted this last night because I think this had to do with the fact Pierre Maguire was between the benches. So you could pick up a little bit more crowd noise, but there was no crowd noise. It sounded like a funeral in there. Nobody says anything. And the only time people really made noise was when the Wild scored or there was a fight or Nordy got on his godforsaken drum.
Yeah, if they thought this team was quiet before when they were, good-ish for that stretch of playoff years, it's going to be really quiet now when they're not good.
Right, and that's another thing. It's just part of the atmosphere. Like, people pay a lot of money to go to Vikings games because it's a tremendous atmosphere for what it is. And if you're going to spend a little bit extra to go see a Vikings game as opposed to a Wild game, yeah, atmosphere in the stadium absolutely factors into why you're spending that money. So
right.
Next question from Morpheus from The Matrix wants to know, what centers do you see the Wild using next season? Is it too late to tank? Well, definitely not too late to tank. They definitely can they keep trading away people. The tank is still on.
Centers, it depends on what you mean by tank, but yeah, I mean they can definitely still try to lose to better their draft pick. I don't think anybody is catching Detroit at this point, but they can certainly try to get towards the top 5, I think.
Right. And it's not like if they don't get in the top 5 lottery odds. It's not like they don't have a chance to move up in the lottery.
Right.
So, as for centers next year, boy, I don't even know. Eric Stahl will be here, probably.
Mm-hmm. Eric Sinek will be here. I don't rule out Mikko Koivu making a return. His contract is up at the end of the year. I very much thought at the beginning of the season that this would be his last season, and that's still possible. But I could see him wanting to still play. I think he's, though he's quiet, I think he has a lot of passion for hockey, and I think that that kind of shows in his career. And I don't think the Wild, are gonna just let him kind of walk out the door. I think that they're very concerned with his legacy, and as we discussed, next year may not be the most important season in Wild history. It may be another quote unquote rebuilding year. So keeping Mikko Koivu around on a relatively affordable deal wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. And throwing him out there for the third line wouldn't kill you. To have a leadership and have somebody that all of these young kids that are going to be around and hopefully look up to him and kind of learn some things from him.
Yeah. Next question, Minnesota 1699 asks, with Stalock and Dubnyk under contract next year, is there even a way to make changes at the position for next season? We kind of hit on that already.
Yeah, we covered that one.
Trent Nelson asks, should we run with 3 goalies? Well, I'm all for it if it means giving Kähkönen starts.
I mean, I think they have the cap spaces to do it. I don't know that Kähkönen is necessarily, a surefire answer, but you might as well at least try. And I don't know, maybe there's a little bit in there where it's like you owe Iowa a little bit. Let them kind of have a little bit of fun with maybe trying to sniff the playoffs and have a little playoff run like they did last year. But I don't know. It wouldn't kill him in a vacuum to get some NHL time.
Man, speaking of Iowa, they're on fire. They're like 7-0-1 in their last 8 games.
Oh yeah, nice.
That's good. Jerry Mayhew just setting the world on fire. Another from Trent asks, is number 22 continuing the trend of number 22 being the fan favorite? Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I mean, Fiala had a really uphill battle to be a fan favorite, taking Nino's number after Nino left, but he has done exactly what you need to do to win over the fans' hearts, and that's play extremely well.
Another from Minnesota 1699 wants us to project Zuccarello's season for the rest of his long contract here, because he doesn't think it's going to turn great by the end, which he's absolutely right, or they are absolutely right. Sorry. I mean, Zuccarello was 32 when he signed this 5-year deal, so he's at 30 points this season, so that puts him roughly on pace to do what, 45
50.
points?
Yeah.
That's if he's at 45 points this season on the first year, that's not good.
Yeah. I mean, if he can make it closer to 50 this year, I don't think that's awful. But then, you're right. It does not look good going forward, as it seldom does with these free agent contracts where guys in their mid-30s get, fairly long terms on these deals. You just kind of know you're going to end up being a kind of a bio risk or an anchor or a contract that's looked to be traded eventually. It's just kind of almost inevitable.
I mean, if he can hang around like 45, 50 points for, 3-4 years, then that might be better, but you generally see players decline in production from here on out, so right. I don't have high hopes of that.
Right.
So, another one from Minnesota 1699. What would you do with Jerry Mayhew and Sam Anis? Because they don't have an opportunity right now on the current roster. Well, I tell you what, I would love to get them an opportunity on the current roster. So I would maybe trade a couple more forwards away to give them that shot for the rest of the year. But that's just me.
It's funny because I know the backstory to this. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think that we talked about this last week, kind of maybe looking to trade some things that aren't nailed down, like a Marcus Foligno, despite some folks' opinions. You got to give these kids a chance at some point. I mean, Sam Anis has been playing fairly well in Iowa for what feels like 17 years now. And Jerry Mayhew has been there for less time, but is playing incredibly well and really kind of deserves a look. I don't know that I don't know. It just seems like you might as well give those kind of kids a shot because it's the NHL and, good productive players can kind of come out of nowhere. Sometimes it doesn't matter that they don't have an outstanding prospect pedigree like some guys. Some guys just don't. And some guys, it clicks for them later or they're just underappreciated for a long time. And I think that's, kind of what we're looking at here. And they just need to get a chance.
Then the last question in the mailbag is from Trent Nelson. Should the Wild have a team cat, and if so, what color of cat? Well, Trent, I hate to break it to you, but cats do not like #OurIce, so there will not be a team cat.
I have 2 gray cats that they can have. If they are interested in having a team cat, I have 2 very bonded, sometimes adorable cats that I'm willing to part with the good of the team.
Just put Muff at goal, and nobody will even go near the goal.
She is a surly one, that one.
Yeah, so there you go. That was the mailbag. Thank you, everyone, for chiming in. That can probably wrap it up, unless there's anything else you wanna cover.
No. Should we talk about how much we're not watching the Stadium Series this weekend?
I mean, yeah, we're probably just gonna watch NBA All-Star Saturday.
Yeah, yeah. Even if I don't join said event, I don't believe I will be watching any of the Stadium Series if I can help it.
It's not appealing. The teams don't appeal to me. The uniforms don't appeal to me. The venue doesn't appeal to me. And neither of the teams, to me, really fit in with the venue. Well, okay, Colorado does. The Kings don't.
Well,
so
yeah. Yeah, the Kings were a weird choice to me. I don't know.
That felt like a tailor-made place for Vegas to slot in.
Yeah, I mean, really, it really did. Did they just get LA because of the population in LA? Like,
I don't know. The Kings are genuinely terrible.
Like, they could have done so many other teams there, and on top of that, LA is terrible and has nobody worth watching.
It should have been an obvious draw for Vegas because of Bill Foley's ties to the Army, I believe it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just seemed like a perfect fit, but I don't know. Apparently, people like Vegas too much. You couldn't slot them in there. You got to shove the Kings down our throat.
Yeah, I really don't understand that. And like you said, the jerseys. Oh my God. Just.
Did you see the alternate logos? I like those a lot better than anything that's on the main uniforms for this event.
I don't know that I have, actually.
I tweeted it. I'll send it to you.
Yeah. Maybe I have, but it always seems like they just go that half step, or in some instances maybe 2 to 3 steps too far with designs when they make jerseys and logos and such. Where they just like. I loved the brief definition of these jerseys is roller hockey on cocaine. And it's just like, yeah, that's what that looks like, because it is terrible and just too much.
Yeah. It's a lot. Yeah, we can sit here all day and go off on this, but we're not. Probably going to go to bed soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that can do it for us. Subscribe on iTunes. If you subscribe via iTunes, leave us a rating. SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Google Play, Spotify, all that fun stuff, where you can also find us. You can also find it at zonecoverage.com/wild, as well as our written content, along with the Jason Zucker trade reaction that we'll have in the coming days. Thank you to our sponsor, CircleRock.com. Use the promo code ZONE25 for a $25 gift card on your next order. You can follow Ben on Twitter at Ben Remington. I am on Twitter at Giles Farrell. Again, our podcast Twitter is at GATGWildPodcast, Facebook.com/GATGWildPodcast. And again, that's ZoneCoverage.com, where everything we say or write goes. So thank you for listening to us this week, and we'll chat with you again next week.
Later.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Gill and the Goaltender podcast.
That's not resiliency. You're making it sound like we're good. That's all. I'm done.